Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. When you're living through a revolutionary moment, everything tends to change whether you want them to or not. For example, John Adams was a staunch patriot, but after the revolution, he lamented to his friend, Dr. Benjamin Rush, that the American Revolution had helped bring about the French Revolution, which in turn had produced, quote, all the calamities and desolations to the human race and the whole globe ever since. That's because revolutions, even ones like the American Revolution of 1776, which was designed to preserve and not destroy, overturn the established order of things. And the same thing is happening now. I've said before that the continuing riots in cities like Portland and Chicago, and the never-ending race now to find everything, no matter how innocuous, as racist, which now can chalk up as its victims camping, jogging, and birdwatching, is in fact a revolutionary moment, which has as its end goal, its telos, the overthrow of the political, social, and cultural system and establishment that we have grown up with. And just in time to prove my point, here comes Vox. The piece in question was written by a woman named Nyla Burton, and it's entitled How Some African Americans Are Finding Solace in African Spirituality. Now, what might surprise you right off the bat is how contemporary practitioners of African spirituality, which includes Yoruba, Lucumi, and Santeria, are people from all walks of life. Burton talks about, for example, a woman named Portia Little, who, in addition to being a Brooklyn-based artist, is also an Aborisha, someone who serves the Orisha, a group of spirits in Yoruba. Joe, a community organizer, and Akisa Britton, who, in addition to being an associate professor of Africana Studies at Rutgers, is also a Lucumi priestess. The piece is chock full of what I like to call feel-good quotes, where the practitioners say how practicing these various strands of African spirituality has actually helped and fulfilled them. Joe, for example, is quoted as saying, "My angels and ancestors have always been the ones to bring me that feeling. As an adult, I was led right back to the same innate practices, Lucumi, I believed in when I was young. I reconnected with the voices and knowings I had turned away from for so long. And it changed my life." Britton, the professor, says, quote, "I am not separated from my Orisa, from my ancestors, from the spirits, as well as from my community. When my sense of self is much broader and attached to other things, I don't feel so isolated. I don't feel so alone, like I'm trying to figure it out on my own." Now, there are a few things right off the bat. In the first place, I'm not sure how forgiving critical theory and critical theorists are going to be when people present Yoruba and Lucumi and other native African belief systems as being generic African belief systems. To give just one example, Yoruba is the religion of the Yoruba people, a specific tribe in southern Nigeria, and its religious beliefs are part of the Itan, which is the complex total of songs, histories, and stories, and other cultural concepts that make up Yoruba society. And since not every African American descends from the Yoruba people, or even from Nigeria, practicing Yoruba when you are not Yorubian or Nigerian is a clear case of cultural appropriation, never mind what your melanin levels are. Which ironically means that the effort to make Yoruba and Lucumi generic one-size-fits-all African spiritual belief systems is another example of multiculturalists not being interested in other cultures. But that's just the small potatoes of the piece, because the real meat and essence of Burton's story is this. African spiritual practices like Yoruba and Lucumi are tools of liberation and resistance against, you guessed it, Western civilization and Christianity. In fact, the idea that Christianity is an oppressive and white religion is taken and beaten over the reader's head until he gives up and shouts uncle. Burton out and out says, quote, "For practitioners of African spirituality, healing often comes in the form of liberation and resistance. These traditions are made even more pressing considering the centuries-long attempts by European slave owners, colonists, and neo-colonists to suppress and demonize these religions." Continuing, Burton not so subtly implies that Christianity as a whole was responsible for the global slave trade, since some unscrupulous people used Christianity to justify slavery. She also out and out says that Christianity was meant to oppress Africans, and that the people who resisted were the ones who created systems like voodoo and hoodoo, which synchronized native African beliefs with Christianity, specifically Catholicism. The narrative continues by saying that Christianity, even today, is still oppressing Africans, with Burton giving the example that the Catholic Church often views native African spiritual practices as akin to demon worship. The whole theme of the piece reaches its crescendo with this gem. Little says that we should interrogate those ingrained beliefs, seeing traditional African religions as demon worship, and where they come from, particularly relating to Christianity and other religions closely related to conquest, murder, homophobia, sexism, and slavery, amongst so many other forms of violence. For Little, it's worth questioning why some in the diaspora have been taught that African religion, which she says connects you with your personal power, identity, and lineage, is evil. She suggests that people need to decolonize their own minds and then see what serves them best. There is a ton to unpack here. In the first place, if anyone says that he took on a religion or converted to a religion as an act of resistance or protest or as a form of liberation, then there's a very good chance that his faith and his religious beliefs are minuscule at best. If you claim to have converted to a specific religion, and I don't even care what the religion is right now, but if you claim that you converted to a particular religion in order to resist a political system, a culture, an idea, then you are inversing religion and have it exactly backwards. Religion, it's not about you making a grand stand. It's not about you making yourself the center of the universe's attention. Religion, when we get right down to it, is about you aligning yourself with the divine for your salvation. It's about you taking a set of beliefs, principles, and dogmas, locking them away in your heart, and implementing them throughout your entire life because you have come to the conclusion that they are true. Not that they're going to get X person elected to Y office, not that it's going to poke a finger in the eye of the man, and not because it's going to lead some sort of a revolution. Anything other than that makes you a fraud, a huckster, and completely unworthy of having any sort of religion whatsoever. In the second place, the idea that Christianity only arrived in Africa in the 16th century with European sailors and slavers, and which was then enforced upon helpless African natives as a way to keep them docile, would be laughed out of the classroom today if we were actually intent on educating people and not giving them propaganda. Because the truth of the matter is that Christianity actually arrived in Africa in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. According to tradition, Mark the Evangelist introduced it to the continent. Furthermore, not only are some of the oldest Christian communities in the world African, but some of the greatest figures in church history are African as well. Tertullian was born in Carthage, in what is now Tunisia. Athanasius was born in Egypt, and St. Augustine, one of the most popular, most famous, most beloved, and most recognizable name in church history, and also one of the greatest of the early church fathers, was born in Numidia, in what is now Algeria. The only reason why we don't think of Christianity when we think of Africa is because of the Muslim invasion of North Africa in the 7th century AD. In the third place, and to move on to something a little deeper, Christianity is one of the foundational blocks of Western civilization. This is true on both a superficial and on a deeper level. Superficially, Christianity was largely responsible for the creation of many institutions which the West is now famous for. Universities, for instance, are an Italian invention. The first one was founded in Bologna in 1087, specifically created at first to teach young men canon law, but which soon expanded to also teach them the humanities and the sciences. Hospitals came about because it was understood to be a Christian duty to serve the poor and to care for the sick, which are two of the corporal works of mercy in Catholic tradition. Libraries were resurrected after the fall of Roman civilization, not just because of the expansion of the university system, but also because of the literary preservation that monks undertook in their monasteries, painstakingly copying books by hand in order to create new editions and copies. To move on to something a little bit deeper, it's largely because of Christianity that Europe made the technological and scientific discoveries and advancements that it did. Dr. Rodney Stark at Baylor University has argued very persuasively that this was because of Christianity's understanding of God as logos, reason and creative power. Because God was reason itself, it followed from that premise that the universe he created was logical, that it ran on reasonable laws and principles that potentially men could discover by applying the reason that God had bequeathed to them. This is one large reason why Europe overtook and surpassed the Muslim world when it came to scientific discoveries and technological advancements, because you see, the Muslim world abandoned the idea that God was reason and replaced it instead with the idea that God was so powerful that not even logic or reason could constrain him. In Islam, it is quite possible for Allah to declare murder to be evil and abhorrent one day, and then the very next day do a 180 and declare it to be good and holy. To say that Allah would not or could not do that would be, to the Muslim perspective, an attack on his omnipotence. From the Muslim perspective, the world doesn't run on reason or logic. It runs solely on the will of Allah. And a world that is run on pure willpower and not on reason is a world that is ultimately inaccessible to us, because everything that we think we know and actually do know about the world and the cosmos could change on the turn of a dime if Allah so willed. And a situation like that makes it practically impossible for us to make any sort of discoveries about the world, nature, and the universe at all. Christianity was also a major influence on Western law and thought. According to Harold Burmer, American legal scholar writing in the Journal of Law and Religion, it was only recently, from the perspective of 1983 when he wrote his essay, that law was seen as being something that was independent from religious thought. Up to the turn of the 20th century, American lawyers, and non-lawyers too as a matter of fact, learned their law by reading the commentaries of William Blackstone, the 18th century British legalist, who famously said, quote, "Law of nature, dictated by God himself, is binding in all countries and at all times. No human laws are of any validity, if contrary to this, and such of them as are valid derive all their force and all their authority immediately or immediately from this original." Berman also explained in his essay that Western law was resurrected, again after the Roman Empire went kaput, when the legal codes of the Emperor Justinian were rediscovered and synchronized for a post-Roman world by Abelard, the father of scholasticism, which was the theological and philosophical system created by the Christian Church for medieval Europe. And finally, Christianity was largely responsible for the ideas of freedom and human rights which we have today. Ideas which came about from the central premise of Christianity, which is that every single person who has existed, exists, and will exist in the future is made in the image of God. He has the Imago Dei stamped upon his soul. It is really this facet of Christian history that really shows the lie in Nyla Burton's Vox piece. Yes, it's true, individual Christians did enslave Africans, along with Muslims and other African tribesmen, but it was Christianity that ultimately freed them. It was the teachings of Christianity that convinced William Wilberforce to devote his life to the eradication of slavery in England. And after his success, which was incarnated in the Anti-Slavery Act of 1833, the Royal Navy was actually commanded to treat all slave ships as if they were pirate ships, thereby eradicating the slave trade in much of the world. A world which had universally, up to that point, seen slavery as just another fact of life. The abolitionist movement in America was fueled largely by Christian preachers in the North. Instead of a religion that has brought nothing but murder, conquest, homophobia, sexism, and slavery, like Porsche Little says, Christianity, whether or not you believe that it has brought spiritual freedom and salvation to people, has categorically brought worldly freedom to millions of people all around the world. Fox's piece, then, is just another propaganda hit piece. But it's very dangerous propaganda for three specific reasons. First, if Christianity is a religion that has brought nothing but conquest, slavery, and bigotry to the world, what should society's attitude be towards practicing Christians? Does being a practicing Christian automatically make you an oppressor and a bigot? If you're part of the ideological left, the answer is, of course it does. This attitude will lead naturally from the soft bigotry that we see now towards Christianity and Christians to a more iron-fisted persecution to all who profess a belief in Christ. Second, as people become more and more indoctrinated to the idea of taking on a religion simply for personal empowerment, the easier they are going to be to control. This is because in order to keep things like Yoruba, Lucumi socially acceptable and chic and in vogue, the people who practice them need to keep in power the people who actually created the environment which allowed these practices to be seen as chic in the first place. The cultural elite. Paradoxically, by pledging themselves to religions that supposedly empower them, they are only enslaving themselves to the cultural elite who promise these practitioners that they will continue to create an environment where they are seen as the good guys and people who might disagree with them, like Christians, are seen as the bad guys. And third, it's become almost a cliche at this point, especially for people on the right, to pass around John Adams's observation that the Constitution was created only for a moral and religious people. Now, when the American Revolution was fought, when the Constitution was ratified, when Adams wrote those words down, religion and morality meant Christianity. But what would happen if the religion and morals of the people of the country changed? Well, it would be the equivalent of changing the foundation of a house. Everything would change. And to bring us back full circle and harnessing the idea that woke intersectionality is a quasi-religion of its own, this shifting away from Christianity towards other religions, whether they're Afrocentric or not, is going to completely change the face of the country. And before anyone starts clapping in approval of that, think about this. If Christianity helped build the West and helped it to accomplish all the things that we've mentioned, scientific endeavors, technological advancements, the idea of human rights, which we hold so dear that we've practically fetishized it now, if Christianity is thrown away, then all of those accomplishments are going to wither and die, because of course the fruit can't stay once the tree has been cut down. And that will create a situation where everyone, with the exception of the elites and their chosen few, will be left holding the bag. We won't have rights, freedom, accomplishments, or progress. We might have things that are given those names, but they are going to be frauds. But as usual, what say you? Is this shift away from Christianity towards more exotic religions, if I may use that term, something to be concerned about, something that's chipping away at the foundation of our country in the West? Or is it people just exercising their First Amendment rights? As always, let me know your thoughts, ideas, and opinions in the comment box below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, before you go, if you could give the video a like and share it with your friends on social media, I would be very much obliged. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, and religion from a unique POV, then don't forget to subscribe and tickle the bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos just like this. Videos you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching and for giving me a little bit of your day. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate you all. And until next time, gang, stay safe, stay free, by daring to read, think, speak, and write. Take care, and I will talk to you soon. Ciao.